My name is Mara Bennett Whitaker, and I am 34 years old. At 4:17 on a Saturday afternoon, my mother-in-law threw me out of the family photo like I was a stain on the carpet. Not asked me to step aside, not suggested we take one without me. Threw me out. Vivian Whitaker stood in the ballroom of Harbor House, the 90-year-old Charleston hotel my husband's family loved to call their legacy, and held my coat between two fingers like it carried disease. Then she tossed it through the open French doors onto the rain-soaked veranda, in front of 52 guests, in front of the photographer, in front of my husband. And then she looked me straight in the eye and said, "Only real Whitakers are standing in this photo." For a second, nobody moved. The string quartet in the corner kept playing. Champagne glasses kept sweating on silver trays. The white roses Vivian had flown in from Atlanta sat perfectly arranged under the family crest. Everything around me looked expensive and polished and clean, except for the way my husband Ethan refused to look at me. I turned to him anyway, because 6 years of marriage teaches you to expect your husband to stand beside you when someone tries to erase you. "Ethan," I said quietly, "say something." He swallowed. His eyes flicked toward his mother, then toward the photographer, then back to the floor. "Please don't make a scene," he whispered. "Just let Mom have this one picture." One picture. That was what he called it. Not the portrait being used for the Whitaker Heritage Foundation's donor campaign, not the image being sent to the bank with their refinancing package, not the photo Vivian had planned to release with the announcement of Harbor House's next generation leadership. Just one picture. Then Vivian lifted her hand and motioned toward the woman standing near the piano. Celeste Monroe, Ethan's ex-girlfriend. The woman Vivian once told me had the kind of bloodline Charleston understands. Celeste walked forward in a cream silk dress and took my place beside my husband. She did it smoothly, like she had rehearsed it, like she had been waiting for me to be removed from the frame. I stood there long enough to understand the whole room had already chosen silence, so I picked up my purse, stepped into the rain, and left. That night, alone in a hotel room on King Street, I received an email from the photographer. Subject line, "Proof Gallery. Unedited, backup included." At first I thought it was just the photos, one more humiliation I wasn't ready to look at. But then I opened the backup folder, and there it was. In one reflection, Vivian was handing Ethan a stack of legal documents with my scanned signature on the bottom. In another, Celeste was wearing the Whitaker pearl necklace Vivian told me I had not earned. And in a 14-second behind-the-scenes video, Vivian's voice came through clear as church bells. "Don't worry about Mara," she said. "By Monday, she won't be part of this family legally or financially." I watched that clip 3 times. Then I opened the safe in my suitcase and took out the operating agreement Vivian apparently forgot I owned. Because the funny thing about throwing someone out of a picture is this: sometimes the person behind the camera catches everything you tried to hide. And by Monday morning, the proof Vivian wanted deleted was sitting on my attorney's desk. By Tuesday, the bank froze every account. And by Friday, Vivian's own lawyer leaned across the conference table and told her 5 words I will never forget. "Do not say another word." I met Ethan Whitaker in a conference room that smelled like burnt coffee and old money. That sounds dramatic, but it is true. At the time, I was 28 and working as a compliance auditor for a firm in Charlotte. I spent most of my days reading financial statements that people hoped no one would read carefully, inflated vendor invoices, charitable donations that somehow circled back into private accounts, family businesses with 2 sets of books and 1 very nervous controller. I was good at my job because numbers never cared who your father was. Numbers did not lower their voice for old surnames. They did not smile politely at lies because the liar had a country club membership. Numbers just sat there, patient and cold, waiting for someone to respect them enough to tell the truth. Ethan's family, I learned later, hated that about numbers. The Whitakers owned Harbor House, a historic hotel near the Charleston waterfront with white columns, deep porches, and a lobby that looked like it had been designed for people who used the word legacy without irony. The building had survived hurricanes, recessions, scandals, and 3 generations of Whitaker men who treated charm like a business plan. Ethan came into my life because Harbor House was being reviewed for a donor-funded restoration grant. The Whitaker Heritage Foundation, run by his mother Vivian, had applied for funding to preserve the property's original ballroom and west wing. My firm had been hired to review the foundation's compliance records before the donors released the money. Ethan was the charming one. Everyone said that. He had the soft southern accent, the pressed shirts, the kind of smile that made older women touch his arm when they laughed. He knew how to make people feel seen for about 90 seconds at a time, which, in Charleston, was apparently enough to build a reputation. The first time we spoke, he leaned against the conference table and said, "You look like you're about to find something terrible." I looked up from the spreadsheet and said, "I usually do." He laughed like I had surprised him. That was what Ethan liked about me in the beginning. I was not from his world, and I was not impressed by it. My father had been a public school principal in Asheville. My mother taught second grade. We were not poor, but we were careful. We fixed things before replacing them. We read contracts before signing them. We did not have silver engraved with family initials or portraits of dead relatives watching us eat dinner. When Ethan invited me to Harbor House for the first time, he called it just a family place. It was not just a family place. It was 4 stories of polished wood, antique mirrors, brass fixtures, and quiet desperation hiding under fresh flowers. The lobby smelled like lemon oil and salt air. The front desk bell was original. So were the cracks in the ceiling, the outdated electrical system, and the unpaid invoices stacked behind the manager's office. Vivian Whitaker met me at the foot of the staircase. She was 63 then, though she would have corrected anyone who said it aloud. Vivian had silver blonde hair cut into a perfect bob, pearls at her throat, and the kind of posture that made chairs seem beneath her. She looked me over once, from my navy dress to my sensible shoes, and smiled without warmth. "So you're the auditor," she said. I held out my hand. "Mara Bennett." She took my hand the way a person accepts a receipt. "Ethan didn't mention you were so young." Ethan laughed nervously beside me. "Mom." Vivian tilted her head. "What?" "It's a compliment." It was not a compliment. I knew that then. I just did not know it would become the first tile in a mosaic I would spend 6 years pretending not to see. Vivian never insulted me loudly in the beginning. That was not her style. She preferred the clean cut, the comment wrapped in silk. At our first Christmas dinner, she placed me near the kitchen doors instead of beside Ethan. "We're very particular about seating," she told me. "Family patterns take time to learn." When Ethan proposed, she kissed my cheek and whispered, "I do hope you understand what you're marrying into." At the rehearsal dinner, she gave a toast about welcoming new faces into old traditions, then spent 5 minutes praising Celeste Monroe, Ethan's former girlfriend, for helping plan the floral arrangements. Celeste was at my wedding. I want that on record. She wore pale blue, stood beside Vivian in nearly every candid photo, and hugged Ethan for just a second too long outside the chapel. When I asked him about it later, he said, "Celeste is basically family. Mom has known her forever. Basically family." That phrase came up a lot after I married Ethan. Celeste was basically family when Vivian invited her to Easter brunch without telling me. Celeste was basically family when she helped organize the foundation's charity auction. Celeste was basically family when Vivian kept a framed photo of Ethan and Celeste from some debutante ball on the upstairs piano, even after our wedding portrait had been moved to the hallway. I told myself not to be petty. That became my private religion for a while. Do not be petty about the seating chart. Do not be petty about the old photograph. Do not be petty about Vivian introducing you as Ethan's wife, but introducing Celeste as our dear Celeste. Do not be petty about Paige, Ethan's younger sister, asking if I plan to keep working after children, as if my career were a hobby I might abandon once I found a better use for my hands. I kept working, and that was the part Vivian could never quite forgive. Because the thing about Harbor House was that it looked wealthy from the street and bleeding from the books. 3 years into my marriage, Ethan came home at 11:40 p.m. and found me reading in bed. His face was gray. Not tired, gray. "What happened?" I asked. He sat on the edge of the mattress and put his head in his hands. "The bank is calling the note," he said. If we don't stabilize the operating account and cover the West Wing repairs, they'll force a sale. I remember the way he said sale, like death. The Whitakers could survive embarrassment. They could survive rumors. They could survive unpaid vendors as long as everyone kept smiling at fundraisers. But losing Harbor House would be different. Losing Harbor House would mean the name was not enough. How much? I asked. Ethan did not answer at first. How much, Ethan? 780,000 to stop the bleeding, he said. More if we actually want to fix the building. I should have asked more questions then. I should have asked why Vivian had not told me. I should have asked why Paige was still drawing a salary from the foundation if the hotel could not pay its roof contractor. I should have asked why Ethan was coming to me in the dark instead of inviting me into a room where decisions were made. Instead, I saw my husband scared, and I filled the gap. That has always been my flaw. I used money from my father's estate, money I had invested carefully after he died, and formed Bennett Compliance Holdings. My attorney structured it cleanly. I bought a 42% financial interest in Harbor House Management LLC with specific protections around transfers, amendments, capital calls, and operating authority. Ethan cried when I signed the final documents. I'll pay you back, he said. This isn't a loan, I told him. It's an investment. We're married. If this matters to you, then it matters to me. He held my hand across the attorney's desk and said, You saved my family. But he never said that in front of Vivian. In front of Vivian, the story became softer, safer, smaller. Mara helped with some paperwork. Mara reviewed a few things. Mara is very organized. Vivian never said I saved Harbor House. Ethan never corrected her, and I let that silence harden around me because I thought protecting my husband's pride was the same as protecting my marriage. It was not. By the 6th year, I had learned the rules of being a Whitaker wife. Smile in photographs. Do not correct Vivian in public. Never mention money unless asked, and you will not be asked. Do not stand too close to Ethan when Vivian is arranging the family portrait, because she will move you with 2 fingers on your elbow and say, Just a little to the side, dear. The light is better there. Every year there was a family photo. Every year I was pushed farther toward the edge. The first year I stood beside Ethan. The second year I stood behind Paige. The third year, Vivian said my burgundy dress clashed with the flowers and asked me to sit for the casual shots instead. The fourth year, my face appeared only in a reflection on the ballroom mirror. The fifth year, Vivian used a cropped version for the foundation newsletter. And I still said nothing. Because a photograph felt too small a thing to fight over when I was the one keeping the insurance current, the contractors paid, and the donor reports clean enough to survive review. Then came the 60th anniversary of the Whitaker Heritage Foundation. That photograph was different. It was not for a Christmas card or a hallway frame. It was going on the foundation website, the donor prospectus, the bank refinancing packet, and the public announcement of Harbor House's next generation leadership. 2 weeks before the event, I found Celeste Monroe's name on the final guest list. Not as a guest, as special family representative. I stared at the words for a long time before asking Ethan about them. He was standing at the bathroom sink, shaving. Why is Celeste listed as a family representative? His hand paused near his jaw, only for a second, but I saw it. Mom handles those labels, he said. That isn't an answer. He rinsed the razor. Mara, it's a Charleston thing. Everyone knows everyone. Celeste has donor relationships. So do I. He looked at me in the mirror then, not directly. In the mirror. I know, he said, but Mom thinks donors respond better to familiar names. Familiar names. I remember standing there in the bathroom doorway, hearing the shower drip behind me, and realizing my husband had just used 2 polite words to tell me I was still a stranger in a house I had paid to save. I wanted to ask him if Vivian knew about Bennett Compliance Holdings. I wanted to ask him if Celeste knew. I wanted to ask why the woman who had never signed a vendor check, never sat through a bank call, never read a foundation disclosure, was suddenly more familiar to donors than the wife who had kept the place alive. But I did not ask. Not yet. Because by then I had learned something numbers had taught me a long time ago. People reveal more when they think you are not watching. So I watched. I watched Ethan step out of rooms to answer calls. I watched Paige stop talking whenever I entered Vivian's sitting room. I watched Vivian order new stationery with Whitaker family leadership embossed in navy ink. I watched Celeste arrive at Harbor House 2 days before the anniversary with 3 garment bags, a pearl hair clip, and the confidence of a woman who had already been promised a place. And on the morning of the family portrait, I put on a dark green dress, pinned my hair back, and told myself one simple thing. If they wanted to make a statement, I was finally ready to read it. The ballroom at Harbor House had been built for beautiful lies. That was the first thought I had when I walked in that afternoon. The ceiling was 20 feet high, painted a soft cream that made the crystal chandeliers look warmer than they were. The floor was original heart pine, polished so thoroughly it reflected the candlelight in long gold streaks. White roses climbed the columns, linen-draped cocktail tables lined the walls. At the far end of the room, beneath the Whitaker family crest, a photographer had already set up 2 lights, a tripod, and a black backdrop trimmed with greenery. Everything looked perfect. That was how Vivian liked things. Not honest, perfect. I arrived 2 hours early because, despite being treated like an accessory, I was still the person everyone called when something went wrong. The caterer needed approval on an invoice. The florist had delivered gardenias instead of magnolias for the entry table. The foundation's donor packets were missing the updated restoration budget. Paige had forgotten to print the seating cards for the trustee dinner. So I fixed it. I always fixed it. I signed the catering receipt. I called the florist. I emailed the correct budget to the printer. I found the seating file on Paige's laptop because she had saved it under Final, Real Final, which told you everything you needed to know about how that family handled responsibility. Vivian passed me 3 times while I was working. The first time she said, "Mara, dear, do try not to look so tense. Donors can sense anxiety." The second time she said, "Your dress is darker than I expected." The third time she didn't say anything at all. She only looked at the folder in my hand, then at Ethan, who was standing near the veranda doors with his phone pressed to his ear. He turned away when he saw me watching him. I should have gone to him then. I should have asked who he was talking to. I should have asked why his voice dropped every time he said the words signature page. I should have asked why Vivian had spent the morning locked in her office with a notary who normally only came to Harbor House when property documents were involved. But there are moments in a marriage when you already know the answer will hurt, so your body gives you 1 more minute of ignorance as a mercy. I took the minute. At 3:30, guests began filling the ballroom. Men in navy suits, women in pearl earrings, trustees from the Whitaker Heritage Foundation, donors Vivian had smiled at for 30 years, people who kissed both cheeks and asked questions they did not want answered. "Mara, how lovely," one woman said, touching my arm. Vivian said, "You've been helping with administrative things." I had personally restructured vendor payments to keep Harbor House from being sued by 2 contractors, negotiated a payment extension with the insurance carrier, and prepared the compliance package that allowed the foundation to retain its charitable status after Paige miscategorized $72,000 in event expenses. But I smiled and said, "Yes, something like that." Across the room, Celeste Monroe appeared at the top of the staircase. She did not walk into Harbor House like a guest. She descended like she had been announced. Cream silk dress, pearl earrings, hair pinned low at her neck, Vivian's favorite shade of lipstick. She carried herself with the easy confidence of someone who had never had to wonder whether she belonged in a room. Paige rushed to greet her. Vivian kissed both of her cheeks. Ethan looked up, and for 1 second, before he remembered himself, my husband smiled at her like a man seeing a version of his life he had been told he should have chosen. That was the moment something inside me stopped pleading. I did not cry. I did not walk over. I did not ask why Celeste was dressed like a bride at a family legacy portrait. I simply watched. Owen Callahan, the photographer, stepped beside me with his camera hanging from his neck. "You're Mrs. Whitaker, right?" he asked. I looked at him. "Depends who you ask." He gave me a small, uncertain smile. "I've been told to get a few formal portraits, then some candid coverage. Is there a shot list?" "There's always a shot list," I said. Vivian appeared before I could say more. She handed Owen a printed page. "Mr. Callahan, this is the order. Foundation trustees first, then donors, Then the Whitaker family legacy portrait. Owen glanced over the list. And Mrs. Whitaker? Vivian's smile did not move. We'll see where she fits. I felt the words land, but I kept my face calm, because Vivian had trained me for this. Little humiliations, spaced out over years, small enough that complaining made me look insecure. A chair too far from Ethan, a photo cropped at the shoulder, a toast that skipped my name, a family heirloom passed to Paige for safekeeping instead of offered to the only married daughter-in-law in the room. Small cuts. That was how she worked. At 4 o'clock, Vivian clapped her hands once. Family portrait, everyone. The room shifted with the strange obedience wealthy families give to women like Vivian. Ethan moved to the center. Vivian stood on his right. Paige took his left. A few older relatives arranged themselves behind them. Celeste lingered near the piano, pretending not to wait. I walked toward Ethan, not quickly, not hesitantly, just as his wife. For the first time all day, he looked directly at me. There was apology in his eyes before anything even happened. That is how I knew he had known. Vivian stepped between us and lifted one hand. No, Mara, not this one. The ballroom grew quieter. I heard the click of Owen adjusting his lens. I heard rain tapping against the veranda doors. I heard my own heartbeat, steady and slow in my ears. Excuse me? I said. Vivian lowered her voice, but not enough. She wanted people to hear. She wanted the room to understand the hierarchy. This is the legacy portrait. I'm aware. Bloodline only. Someone behind me inhaled softly. I looked at Ethan. Say something. His jaw worked once, twice. Mara, he said, almost pleading. Please don't make a scene. I stared at him. Those 6 words did something worse than break my heart. They clarified it. Because he was not confused. He was not trapped. He was choosing the easiest version of himself. The one his mother could still control. Vivian tilted her head. You can be in the casual photographs later, dear. This one is for the actual Whitaker family. The actual Whitaker family, I repeated. Paige looked away, but she was smiling. Celeste lowered her eyes in a performance of discomfort so delicate it might have fooled me 6 years ago. Then Vivian turned toward her. Celeste, sweetheart, come stand here. No one corrected her. No one laughed awkwardly and said, Vivian, stop. No one reminded her that Ethan was married. Celeste stepped forward. She passed close enough for me to smell her perfume, something soft and floral and expensive. As she moved into the space beside Ethan, I saw the necklace at her throat. The Whitaker pearls. Vivian had once refused to let me wear them for my own wedding reception. They're not costume jewelry, she had said then, closing the velvet case before I could touch them. Some things have to be earned. Apparently, Celeste had earned them by waiting. I looked at Ethan again. He did not step away from her. My voice came out quieter than I expected. So this is what we're doing? In front of everyone? Vivian moved toward the chair where I had laid my coat. Navy wool. My father had bought it for me the winter before he died. She lifted it with 2 fingers as though it were something damp and unpleasant. We are protecting the family image, she said. Then she walked to the French doors, opened one, and threw my coat onto the veranda. Rain hit it immediately. For a moment, the room held its breath. Owen lowered his camera half an inch. Ethan whispered, Mom, not stop, not apologize, just Mom. Vivian turned back to me. Only real Whitakers are standing in this photo. I could have screamed then. I could have told every donor in that room who had paid the overdue insurance premium. I could have told the bank representative near the bar that the woman being thrown out had more legal authority over Harbor House than anyone standing under that crest. I could have told Celeste to take off the pearls before she confused jewelry with legitimacy. But I did none of that. Because rage is loud, and I had learned long ago that loud people usually reveal less. So I walked to the veranda, picked up my wet coat, and put it over my arm. The rain was cold through the sleeve of my dress. Behind me, Vivian said to Owen, Make sure she isn't visible in any reflection. That was the sentence that almost made me turn around. Almost. Instead, I looked at Owen. He looked back at me. There was something in his face I could not read then. Not pity exactly, more like recognition. Like he had been hired to photograph a family and had accidentally walked into an execution. I left through the side hall because I refused to give them the drama of watching me cross the ballroom. Outside, my hands shook so badly I dropped my keys twice before I got the car door open. I sat in the driver's seat with my wet coat in my lap, looking through the rain-blurred windshield at the windows of Harbor House. A flash went off inside. Then another. The legacy portrait. Without me, with Celeste, with my husband standing still. I drove to a small hotel on King Street and checked in under my maiden name because saying Whitaker felt like swallowing glass. For 2 hours, Ethan did not call. At 6:42 p.m. he texted, "Mom is emotional. Don't escalate this." I read it 3 times. Then I typed, "Your mother threw me out of a family portrait and put your ex-girlfriend beside you." I deleted it. I typed, "You let her." I deleted that too. Finally, I set the phone face down on the desk and took off my dress. My coat was still damp. My hair smelled faintly of rain and roses. In the bathroom mirror, I looked less like a wife and more like a witness. At 9:16 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Not Ethan, an email from Owen Callahan Photography. Subject line, "Proof gallery, unedited, backup included." I stared at it for a long moment. Proof. It was a photographer's word. Ordinary, professional, harmless. But after the day I had just lived, it felt like something else. I opened the email. The first folder was named Selected Portraits. The second was named Full Backup. The third was named Behind the Scenes. And under the download link, Owen had written one sentence. "Mrs. Whitaker, I thought you should have everything before anyone asks me to delete it." I sat down slowly. Then I clicked download. The first photograph loaded slowly. For a moment, all I saw was the top half of the ballroom, the chandeliers bright against the cream ceiling, the white roses framing the Whitaker crest, the polished floor reflecting everything too beautifully. Then the full image appeared. There they were. The Whitaker family legacy portrait. Vivian stood at the center like she had been carved there. One hand rested lightly on Ethan's arm. Paige stood on the other side, smiling with all her teeth. 2 elderly cousins flanked the back row. And Celeste Monroe stood where I should have been, close enough to my husband that her shoulder almost touched his chest. Ethan's hand was visible at his side, not on Celeste, not reaching for me, just hanging there, useless and still. I stared at that hand longer than I stared at his face, maybe because a hand tells the truth faster than a mouth. A hand either reaches or it doesn't. A hand either opens or it stays closed. Ethan's hand had done nothing while his mother threw my coat into the rain. I clicked to the next photograph. Another polished lie. Same faces, same flowers, same family crest. Celeste tilted her head slightly toward Ethan in that one, and the pearls at her throat caught the light. The Whitaker pearls. Vivian's pearls. The same ones she had refused to let me wear at my wedding reception because, as she put it, heirlooms carry responsibility. I zoomed in until the screen blurred at the edges. There they were, 3 strands of ivory pearls clasped with a tiny diamond flower. I remembered that clasp. I remembered standing in Vivian's dressing room in my wedding gown, my hair half pinned, my mother crying quietly by the window because my father was already gone and she was trying to be brave for both of us. Vivian had opened the velvet case then. For one foolish second, I thought she was offering the necklace to me. Instead, she lifted it, smiled, and said, "This belonged to Ethan's grandmother. It will go to the right woman when the time is right." My mother had gone completely still. I had told myself not to care. That was the lie I told most often in that family. I kept clicking. The selected gallery was exactly what Vivian had wanted. Clean, elegant, cropped, every photo arranged to tell the same story. The Whitakers were united. The Whitakers were stable. The Whitakers had a future. And I was not in it. When I reached the end of the selected folder, I sat back in the hotel chair and let the silence of the room settle around me. Outside the window, King Street was wet with rain, headlights sliding over the pavement in long yellow lines. Somewhere downstairs, someone laughed too loudly near the bar. My phone sat beside the laptop, face down, still holding Ethan's message. "Don't escalate this." I almost laughed. Escalation apparently was what happened when a woman refused to disappear on command. I opened the second folder. Full backup. There were 683 files. The first 100 were harmless. Caterers adjusting trays, trustees shaking hands, Paige laughing with donors, Vivian inspecting flowers like she was reviewing troops before battle. Then I found the first image that made my stomach tighten. It was not centered on me. That made it worse. I was in the left edge of the frame, half turned toward Ethan, my face pale, my wet coat still on the chair behind me. Vivian stood between us with one hand raised, the exact moment she stopped me from entering the family portrait. Ethan was looking at the floor. Not Vivian. Not me. The floor. I pressed my fingers against my lips. There is a special kind of pain that comes from seeing your humiliation frozen from the outside. When you live it, your body protects you. It narrows the moment. It gives you one sound, one face, one breath at a time. A photograph gives it all back. Every witness, every silence, every person who decided your pain was less inconvenient than their discomfort. I clicked again. Another photo. Vivian holding my coat. Another. The coat leaving her hand. Another. The coat hitting the veranda boards. The dark wool folding into the rain. And in the background, slightly blurred but unmistakable, Celeste was touching the pearls at her throat and smiling. Not nervously, not awkwardly, smiling. I sat very still, because that smile told me what Ethan had not. This had not surprised her. I went deeper into the folder, scrolling past bursts of photos taken when Owen must have kept shooting out of instinct. The metadata showed timestamps down to the second. 4:15 p.m. Vivian blocks me. Ethan looks away. My coat goes through the doors. Celeste steps forward. The portrait begins. A timeline. That was what I saw now. Not photographs. Evidence. My breathing changed. I stopped being the wife standing outside in the rain and became what I had been before I ever married Ethan Whitaker. A compliance auditor. A woman trained to follow what careless people leave behind. I opened the third folder. Behind the scenes. There were 11 clips. The first was harmless. Owen testing lighting while Paige complained that the flowers looked too funeral. The second showed Vivian directing staff to move a side table. The third was a shaky clip of Ethan on the veranda, phone pressed to his ear. I turned up the volume. His voice was low, but the microphone caught enough. "No, I have the signature page," he said. "Mom wants it attached before Monday." "Yes, I know what the operating agreement says." My hand froze over the trackpad. Signature page, operating agreement. I replayed it. "No, I have the signature page. Mom wants it attached before Monday." The clip ended. I clicked the next one. Vivian stood near the silver punch bowl with Paige. They were behind the floral arrangement, half hidden from the main room. The camera had been angled toward the donor table, but the audio picked them up clearly. Paige said, "What if Mara asks why Celeste is in the portrait?" Vivian gave a soft little laugh. "Then Ethan will handle his wife. His wife. Not my daughter-in-law. Not Mara. Not family. His wife." Paige glanced toward the ballroom. "And if she refuses to sign?" "She already signed enough," Vivian said. "We only need the right page in the right packet." My throat went dry. I dragged the playhead back and listened again. "She already signed enough. We only need the right page in the right packet." I knew what that meant because I had seen it before in fraud reviews. Someone takes a legitimate signature from one document, attaches it to another, then counts on speed, pressure, and family trust to carry the lie past anyone who might object. But there was one thing Vivian had never understood about me. I read everything. I clicked the 5th clip. That was the one Owen had probably meant for me to find. Vivian's voice came through clearer than before. She was speaking to someone off camera. I could see only part of her face reflected in a tall antique mirror near the ballroom door. Ethan stood behind her, holding a folder. Celeste was beside him, looking down at the papers. Vivian said, "Don't worry about Mara. By Monday, she won't be part of this family legally or financially." Celeste asked, "Can Ethan actually remove her?" Vivian answered without hesitation. "Ethan is a Whitaker. Mara is a signature." I stopped the video. For several seconds, I did not move. There are insults you can survive because they are stupid. There are insults you can survive because they come from people whose opinions stopped mattering years ago. But that sentence did something different. Mara is a signature. 6 years of marriage, 3 years of silent financial rescue, countless nights reviewing budgets after Ethan had fallen asleep, hundreds of thousands of dollars pulled from the estate my father left me. My work, my name, my risk, my caution, my loyalty, reduced to a signature. I pushed back from the desk and stood up too fast. The hotel room tilted for half a second. I walked to the window, pressed both palms against the cold glass, and forced myself to breathe in, out, again. My father used to say panic was expensive. He had been a principal, not an accountant, But he understood people. He used to tell me, "Mara, the first person to lose their temper usually loses the room." Vivian had been counting on me losing the room. She wanted me crying in the lobby. She wanted me leaving angry voicemails. She wanted screenshots of my messages, proof that I was emotional, unstable, vindictive. She wanted to turn my pain into her defense. So I did not call Ethan. I did not call Vivian. I did not call Celeste and ask her how it felt to wear stolen pearls beside a borrowed husband. I sat back down and opened my travel safe. Inside were the things Vivian had always underestimated because they did not glitter. The original operating agreement for Harbor House Management LLC, the capital contribution records from Bennett Compliance Holdings, the notarized amendment restrictions, the bank acknowledgement letter confirming I held protective approval rights over any management restructuring, debt increase, equity dilution, or transfer of operating authority. I laid each document on the hotel bed in neat rows. Then I opened my secure email and found the one message Ethan did not know I had received. It had come from Palmetto Atlantic Bank 3 days earlier. Subject: Pending Amendment Packet, Harbor House Management LLC. At the time, I had not opened it because I was buried under event invoices, and Vivian had told everyone the bank packet was routine. Now I clicked it with my pulse steady in my wrists. The attached summary loaded. Pending request management restructuring, submitted by Ethan R. Whitaker. Additional authorized representative, Celeste Monroe, Monroe Hospitality Advising LLC. Member consent attached, Mara Bennett Whitaker. I stared at the last line. Member consent attached. Then I opened the PDF. There was my name. There was my signature, except it was not my signature. Not exactly. It was close enough to fool someone who wanted to be fooled, but the final stroke in Bennett curved upward too sharply, lifted at the end in a way mine never did. My signature came from years of signing audit certifications in blue ink, fast but consistent. Whoever made this had copied the shape but not the habit. They had taken my name. They had taken my money. They had tried to take my legal rights. And they had done it in the same week Vivian threw me out of a photograph for not being real family. At 12:38 a.m., I called Rebecca Haynes, my attorney. She answered on the fourth ring, voice rough with sleep. "Mara, are you hurt?" "No," I said, "but I think Ethan's family just tried to forge my signature." The sleep left her voice immediately. "Tell me everything." So I did. I told her about the portrait, the coat, the pearls, Celeste, the email from Owen, the video, the bank packet, the operating agreement, Vivian's words. Mara is a signature. Rebecca did not interrupt once. When I finished, she was quiet for 3 seconds. Then she said, "Do you still have the original files from the photographer?" "Yes." "Do not forward them to Ethan. Do not warn Vivian. Do not respond to any family messages. Send everything to me through the secure portal. Every photo, every video, every bank document. Can we stop the amendment?" "Mara," she said, "we're not just going to stop it. We're going to make them explain it." I looked at the frozen video frame on my laptop. Vivian's reflection in the mirror, Ethan holding the folder, Celeste wearing the pearls. For the first time all night, my hands stopped shaking. Rebecca said, "And Mara?" "Yes, download everything twice." I did. 1 copy went to Rebecca. 1 copy went to an encrypted drive. And before I closed the laptop, I opened the legacy portrait one more time. There they were, under the Whitaker crest, smiling like they had successfully removed me from the frame. They had no idea the frame had caught them all. By 8 the next morning, I had not slept. I had tried. At 2:30, I turned off the laptop, stacked the documents back into the travel safe, and lay down on top of the hotel sheets with my clothes still on. The room was too quiet. Every sound from the hallway made me think of Ethan's footsteps. Every buzz from my phone made my stomach tighten before I saw the screen. But Ethan did not call. Vivian did not call. Paige did not call. That should have comforted me. It did not. Silence from people who had just tried to steal from you is not peace. It is strategy. At 6:11 a.m., I got out of bed, showered, and made coffee in the little single-cup machine beside the television. It tasted like burnt plastic and regret, but I drank it anyway. Then I opened my laptop and began building a timeline. That was what I did when emotions got too loud. I made them prove themselves in order. August 14, 9:07 a.m. Palmetto Atlantic Bank sent pending amendment packet to my email. August 15th, 2:18 p.m. Ethan forwarded a PDF titled Signature Page to Vivian. I knew this because he had accidentally copied me on a blank reply chain, then recalled the message 3 minutes later. I had ignored it at the time. August 16th, 11:42 a.m. Monroe Hospitality Advising LLC received a wire transfer of $185,000 from Harbor House Management. August 17th, 4:16 p.m. Vivian threw my coat onto the veranda and removed me from the family portrait. August 17th, 4:17 p.m. Celeste Monroe took my place beside Ethan. August 17th, 9:16 p.m. Owen Callahan sent the unedited proof gallery. By the time I finished, I was no longer shaking. That scared me more than the shaking had. Anger had burned through the night and left something colder behind. Clarity. At 8:03, Rebecca called. I reviewed the first batch, she said. No greeting, no softness. That was why I liked her. We have enough to notify the bank and halt the pending amendment. I already drafted the emergency objection. You already drafted it? I started at 2 a.m. I looked at the rainwater drying in stiff patches on the sleeve of my coat. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be precise. That almost made me smile. Rebecca Haynes had been my attorney for 9 years. She had handled my father's estate after he died, helped me form Bennett Compliance Holdings, and looked at Ethan Whitaker for exactly 10 minutes before telling me, he may love you, but he has no spine where his mother is concerned. I had been offended then. I was not offended anymore. What do you need from me? I asked. Confirmation that you did not sign or authorize the management amendment. I did not. Confirmation that you did not approve Celeste Monroe or Monroe Hospitality Advising as an authorized representative, consultant, officer, manager, advisor, agent, or beneficiary of Harbor House Management. I did not. Confirmation that you did not approve the $185,000 payment. I didn't even know about it until last night. Good. I'm sending a notice to Palmetto Atlantic Bank, Harbor House Management's registered agent, and the Foundation's counsel. No transfers, no amendments, no new credit draws, no management changes. We'll demand preservation of all communications, drafts, metadata, and notary logs. I sat up straighter. Notary logs? If Vivian brought in a notary yesterday, I want to know why. I closed my eyes. The image came back clearly. Vivian in the side office. The door cracked. A woman in a gray blazer leaving with a leather folio tucked under her arm. Ethan standing in the hall afterward, rubbing his thumb over his knuckles the way he did when he was nervous. I saw one, I said, at Harbor House yesterday morning. Rebecca was quiet for half a second. Name? I don't know, mid-50s, gray blazer, dark hair. She came out of Vivian's office around 11. I'll find her. How? Mara, Rebecca said, rich people are very bad at committing quiet crimes in buildings full of staff. That time, I did smile. After we hung up, I opened the bank portal. I still had access because Ethan had never understood the difference between courtesy access and legal authority. He thought the portal was there so I could help with paperwork. He forgot that my approval rights were built into the structure of the entire operating agreement. The dashboard loaded slowly, then the accounts appeared. Operating account $62,418, payroll reserve $19,203, restoration escrow $417, credit line available $600,000. Pending activity 3 items. My pulse slowed. I clicked pending activity. The first was a vendor payment to a restoration contractor, real, scheduled for Monday. The second was a transfer request for $75,000 to Monroe Hospitality Advising, memo line, Brand Transition Consulting. The third was a draft request from the credit line for $250,000, initiated by Ethan R. Whitaker, categorized as Event Expansion and Donor Relations. I stared at the screen. Event Expansion, Donor Relations. That was what they were calling it now. I downloaded everything: transaction history, user logs, authorization records, pending approval requests, screenshots with timestamps. Then I forwarded the packet to Rebecca through the secure portal. At 9:12, Ethan finally called. I watched his name light up the phone. For 6 years, that name had meant home, even when home hurt. Now it looked like evidence. I let it ring until voicemail. He called again, then texted. Can we talk like adults? I looked at the message for a long time. Like adults? As if I had been the one playing dress-up with forged documents and stolen pearls. I did not answer. At 9:28, Vivian called. I let that go to voicemail, too. At 9:34, Paige texted, "Mom is very upset. You need to stop punishing everyone over a photo." I screenshotted it and sent it to Rebecca. At 9:41, Ethan texted again, "Mara, this is getting out of hand. Mom says the bank called." "That one," I answered. "Good." 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, Ethan wrote, "What did you do?" I typed 1 sentence. "I protected what I own." He called within 10 seconds. This time I answered. "What the hell is going on?" he said. "No hello. No apology. No how are you after my mother humiliated you in front of half of Charleston. Just panic." "Good morning, Ethan." "Don't good morning me. The bank froze the amendment packet. They said you filed an objection." "Yes." "Why would you do that?" I turned my chair toward the window. Outside, the city looked washed clean, the sidewalks shining from last night's rain. "Because I didn't sign it." There was a pause. Then, too quickly, he said, "Nobody said you signed anything." "Your amendment packet did." Another pause, this one longer. "Mara, that was preliminary." "With my signature attached?" "It wasn't filed yet." "That's not an answer." He lowered his voice. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under." There it was, the family anthem. Pressure. Vivian used it, Paige used it, Ethan used it whenever he needed his mistakes to sound like weather. "I understand exactly what pressure does," I said. "It shows people where their spine ends." He inhaled sharply. "You're angry. I'm accurate. Mara, Mom thought it would be cleaner if the family handled operations publicly. You don't even like being in the spotlight. That's why she threw me out of the spotlight. She should not have done that." It was the closest thing to an apology he had offered. I let it sit there. Then I asked, "Why was Celeste wearing the pearls?" He did not answer. "Why was Celeste in the portrait?" "Mara, why did you tell someone on video that you had the signature page?" This time the silence had weight. "You have video?" I closed my eyes. "Now are you okay?" "Not what video? Not I would never forge your name. Just you have video?" "Yes," I said. "From Owen? That's what you're worried about?" "Mara, you need to send me whatever he sent you before this becomes a misunderstanding." I almost laughed again. "Ethan, this stopped being a misunderstanding when my name appeared on a document I didn't sign. You're making it sound criminal." "No, you did that when you used the signature." His voice cracked then, not with guilt but with fear. "Mom said it was fine." And there it was, the sentence that ended my marriage before any court could. Mom said it was fine. Not I thought it was fine. Not I checked with counsel. Not I would never betray you. A 37-year-old man hiding behind his mother while standing inside a company my money had kept alive. I looked down at my left hand. My wedding ring caught the hotel lamp in a small, clean flash. "When your mother threw my coat into the rain," I said, "you asked me not to make a scene." He was breathing hard now. "Mara, when she put Celeste beside you, you stayed still. That was complicated. When she used my signature, you helped. I didn't know she would submit it, but you knew enough to hold the folder." Silence. I removed my ring slowly, not dramatically, just enough to feel the cool absence on my finger. Then I said, "All future communication goes through Rebecca." "Mara, don't do this. You did this. I documented it." I hung up before he could say my name again. For a long time I sat there with the phone in my lap. I wanted to feel powerful. I did not. I felt tired in a way that settled behind my eyes and into my bones. The kind of tired that comes when love finally becomes a ledger and you realize the account has been overdrawn for years. At 10:22, Rebecca emailed me. Subject line, "Emergency notices served. Palmetto Atlantic Bank had frozen all pending amendments and discretionary transfers. Harbor House Management's credit line was suspended pending review. The registered agent had been instructed to preserve records. The Foundation's counsel had requested a meeting for Monday morning." At the bottom of Rebecca's email was one final line. "Do not attend alone." I looked at my wet coat hanging over the back of the chair. Then I opened Vivian's Facebook page. She had posted the portrait. The caption read, "The Whitaker family united for the next generation." Celeste stood beside my husband, Vivian stood beneath the crest, and I was nowhere in the frame. The comments were exactly what Vivian wanted. Beautiful family, such grace. Charleston tradition at its finest. So proud of this legacy. Then someone asked, "Where is Mara?" Paige had replied, "Some people choose not to be part of family moments." I stared at that sentence until the words stopped being words and became evidence too. Screenshot. Save. Forward. That afternoon, Owen emailed again. Mrs. Whitaker, my assistant, found another B-roll file from the second camera. You should see it. The attachment was only 46 seconds long. In it, Vivian stood near the veranda doors before the portrait. Ethan was beside her. Celeste stood just behind them, touching the pearls. Vivian said, "Once the photo goes live, donors will assume Celeste is already part of the family." Paige asked, "And Mara?" Vivian smiled. "By the time Mara realizes what happened, the paperwork will already be finished." The clip ended. I replayed it once. Then I sent it to Rebecca. Her reply came back in less than a minute. "Monday will be short. I looked at the portrait one last time. They had wanted a picture to prove I did not belong. Instead, they had created a time-stamped map of their own fraud. And for the first time since Vivian threw my coat into the rain, I whispered out loud to the empty hotel room, 'Thank you for the proof.'" Monday morning, Harbor House looked exactly the way Vivian wanted the world to see it. The front porch had been swept clean. The brass door handles were polished. Fresh magnolias sat in 2 tall blue and white vases by the entrance. Even the sky seemed to cooperate, bright and cloudless, as if Charleston itself had decided to pretend nothing rotten was happening under the roofline. That was the thing about buildings like Harbor House. They knew how to lie. I arrived at 9:47 a.m. in a black dress, low heels, and no wedding ring. Rebecca Haynes pulled into the lot 30 seconds after me in a silver sedan, carrying a leather briefcase and the expression of a woman who charged by the hour because she was worth every minute. She looked at my left hand first, then at my face. "You're sure?" she asked. "I'm sure about the meeting," I said. "That isn't what I asked." I glanced up at the hotel windows. Somewhere behind one of them, Vivian was probably arranging herself into the wounded matriarch. Ethan was probably telling himself this could still be fixed. Paige was probably crying in a way that made other people feel responsible for her tears. And Celeste, if she had any sense at all, was probably wishing she had never touched those pearls. "I'm sure enough," I said. Rebecca nodded once. "Then we go in quiet." That was all. Inside, the lobby smelled like lemon oil and lilies. The portrait Vivian had posted online had already been printed and placed on an easel near the donor table. I stopped when I saw it. The Whitaker family united for the next generation. There they were, smiling under the crest. Vivian, Ethan, Paige, Celeste. No me, no trace of me, not even a shadow. Rebecca followed my gaze. "Do you want it removed?" I shook my head. "No, leave it up." She understood immediately. Evidence always worked best when the other side framed it for you. The meeting was held in the West Parlor, a long room with tall windows facing the garden. I had reviewed vendor contracts in that room. I had negotiated payment schedules there. I had once spent 4 hours sitting at that same mahogany table, rebuilding a donor compliance report because Paige had filed restricted funds under general event income. None of that had ever made me family. Everyone was already seated when we walked in. Vivian sat at the head of the table, wearing ivory and pearls, her back straight, her hands folded as if she were about to chair a charity luncheon instead of explain a forged signature. Ethan sat to her right. He looked worse than I expected. His shirt collar was slightly crooked and there were shadows under his eyes. Paige sat beside him, clutching a tissue. Celeste sat at the far end, pale but polished, the Whitaker pearls gone from her throat. That absence pleased me more than it should have. Across from Vivian sat Graham Ellis, the Whitaker family attorney, a narrow man in a navy suit who looked like he had not been told the whole truth and was beginning to suspect that was expensive. Beside him was Martin Bell, senior vice president from Palmetto Atlantic Bank. He had a folder in front of him, his pen aligned perfectly with the table edge. Rebecca and I sat across from Ethan and Vivian. No one spoke for a moment. Vivian broke the silence. "Mara," she said in the soft voice she used when donors were nearby, "I'm glad you decided to come in person. This has gotten unnecessarily dramatic." Rebecca opened her briefcase. Vivian's eyes flicked toward it. "This is a family matter," Vivian continued, "and I think everyone in this room understands that emotions ran high on Saturday." "Mrs. Whitaker," Rebecca said, "before we begin, I'll make clear that my client is here voluntarily and will not be signing anything today." Vivian smiled. "How aggressive. How accurate," Rebecca said. Ethan leaned forward. "Mara, can we just talk for 5 minutes without lawyers?" I looked at him. For 1 weak second, I saw the man I had married. Like the man who brought me coffee when I worked late. The man who cried in our kitchen when he thought Harbor House was gone. The man who held my hand across an attorney's desk and said I had saved his family. Then I remembered his hand hanging uselessly at his side while my coat landed in the rain. "No," I said. The word landed harder than I expected. Ethan sat back. Vivian sighed, as if she were disappointed in a child. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," she said. "Mara has chosen to punish the entire family because she was not placed where she wanted in a photograph." Rebecca looked at me. I nodded. She connected her laptop to the screen mounted on the wall. The first image appeared. Vivian holding my coat. No one moved. The second image. Vivian's arm extended toward the open veranda doors. The third. My coat midair, falling into the rain. The fourth. Me standing on the veranda, wet coat in my hands, while Ethan looked at the floor behind me. Vivian's face hardened. That is completely out of context. Rebecca clicked once. The video began. Vivian's voice filled the parlor. "Only real Whitakers are standing in this photo." Paige made a small sound. Ethan closed his eyes. Celeste looked down at the table. The video ended. Rebecca did not speak immediately. She let the silence do its work. Then she said, "Mrs. Whitaker, would you like to explain the context?" Vivian lifted her chin. It was a private family portrait. "In a ballroom full of donors and staff," Rebecca said. "It was not meant to include everyone. Your daughter-in-law is not everyone." Vivian's eyes sharpened. "Mara has always been very sensitive about her place in this family." I laughed once. I did not mean to. It came out quiet and cold. Vivian looked at me like I had tracked mud onto the carpet. Rebecca clicked again. The legacy portrait appeared next. The perfect one, the selected one. Celeste beside Ethan, smiling under the Whitaker crest. Martin Bell, the banker, looked at the screen, then at Celeste. Something in his face changed. Not shock. Calculation. Rebecca said, "This portrait was posted publicly by the foundation with the caption, 'The Whitaker family, united for the next generation.' It was posted after my client had been forcibly excluded from the photograph." "Forcibly," Vivian repeated. "Good Lord." Rebecca ignored her. She clicked again. The next image zoomed in on Celeste's neck. The pearls. Vivian's expression flickered for the first time. Rebecca said, "Miss Monroe, were you aware that you were being visually presented as part of the Whitaker family leadership structure?" Celeste swallowed. "I was invited to support the event." "With heirloom family jewelry?" Vivian cut in. "The pearls are mine to lend." Rebecca turned to her. "And Harbor House funds are also yours to lend?" The room went still. Martin Bell uncapped his pen. Vivian's face did not change, but Ethan's did. Rebecca brought up the wire record. Harbor House Management LLC, outgoing wire, $185,000. Recipient, Monroe Hospitality Advising LLC. Memo, renovation consulting. Celeste's lips parted. "I didn't know it came from that account," she said. Vivian snapped, "Celeste." Graham Ellis, Vivian's attorney, finally spoke. "Mrs. Whitaker, let her answer only if asked by counsel." Rebecca looked at him. "Oh, I'll be asking." Then she opened the next file. Pending transfer, $75,000. Recipient, Monroe Hospitality Advising LLC. Memo, brand transition consulting. And the next, pending credit line draw, $250,000. Purpose, event expansion and donor relations. Martin Bell leaned forward. "These were not disclosed in the materials we received Friday." Rebecca said, "No, they were not. And neither was this." She opened the amendment packet. The PDF filled the screen. Harbor House Management LLC amended operating agreement. Additional authorized representative, Celeste Monroe. Member consent, Mara Bennett Whitaker. There was my signature. Close enough. Wrong enough. Rebecca zoomed in. "My client did not sign this document," she said. Vivian folded her hands. "That is a serious accusation." "Yes," Rebecca said. "It is." Vivian looked at Ethan. Ethan looked like he was going to be sick. I watched him carefully. Some part of me still wanted him to stand up and say it was all a mistake, that he had been tricked, that he had never meant to use my name like a piece of office equipment. Instead, he whispered, "Mom said it was just procedural." Martin Bell's pen stopped moving. Vivian turned on him. "Ethan." But it was too late. The room had heard it. Rebecca clicked again. The video from Owen's second camera began. Vivian's voice came through clearly. "Once the photo goes live, donors will assume Celeste is already part of the family." Paige's voice followed. "And Mara?" Vivian smiled on screen. By the time Mara realizes what happened, the paperwork will already be finished. The parlor became so quiet I could hear the air conditioning click on. Vivian stared at the screen. For the first time since I had known her, she had no immediate sentence ready. Rebecca closed the video. Then she looked at Martin Bell. Mr. Bell, Palmetto Atlantic Bank has now seen evidence suggesting that a management amendment was submitted with a disputed signature, undisclosed related party payments, and pending transfer requests to a company associated with a non-member who was publicly represented as part of the family leadership structure. Does the bank intend to proceed with the amendment? Martin Bell did not look at Vivian. No. Vivian's head turned. Excuse me? The amendment is suspended pending formal investigation, he said. All discretionary credit activity is frozen. Transfers above $5,000 require dual verification and counsel review. The bank will also require an independent audit before reopening the refinancing discussion. Paige began to cry, not quietly. Ethan put his hands over his face. Celeste pushed back from the table. I want my attorney, she said. Rebecca nodded. That would be wise. Vivian stood. You people are allowing a jealous wife to destroy a 90-year legacy over one photograph. I stood too. I had not planned to, but something in me rose before I could stop it. One photograph, I said. My voice was calm. That surprised me. You threw me out of that room because you thought a picture could decide who belonged. You put Celeste beside my husband because you thought people would believe whatever you framed beautifully enough. You used my signature because you thought my name was just a formality. Vivian's mouth tightened. You are not a Whitaker. No, I said. I'm not. That's why I didn't bankrupt myself trying to look like one. Her face went white. Graham Ellis rose halfway from his chair. Vivian, he said, low and urgent, do not say another word. But Vivian was Vivian. She had spent a lifetime mistaking control for intelligence. She was never family, she snapped. She was useful. There it was. The truth, clean and ugly, placed on the table by the only person foolish enough to say it aloud. Rebecca picked up her pen and wrote something down. Martin Bell closed his folder. Ethan looked at me then. Really looked at me. Not as his mother's problem, not as his wife, not as a signature, as the person he had lost. Mara, he whispered. I picked up my bag. No, I said. You don't get to use my name now. Then I turned to Rebecca. I'm ready. She stood beside me. As we walked out, I passed the easel in the lobby. The portrait was still there, Vivian's perfect family, smiling under the crest. I stopped, took out my phone and photographed it. One more piece of proof. Then I walked through the front doors of Harbor House without looking back. 3 weeks after the meeting, Vivian Whitaker resigned as chair of the Whitaker Heritage Foundation. Officially, the statement said she was stepping back to focus on family and personal matters. That was the kind of sentence people in Charleston used when the truth was too ugly to print on cream stationery. The unofficial version moved faster. It started with staff whispers, then donor phone calls, then one carefully worded article in the local business journal about financial irregularities at a historic family-run hotel. No one mentioned my coat. No one mentioned the veranda. No one mentioned Celeste wearing pearls that had never belonged to her. But everyone knew something had happened. The foundation hired an independent auditor within 10 days. Not because Vivian wanted transparency, but because Palmetto Atlantic Bank demanded it before they would even consider reopening the refinancing discussion. The audit confirmed what Rebecca and I already knew. The $185,000 transfer to Monroe Hospitality Advising had no approved contract attached. The pending $75,000 transfer had been submitted without proper member authorization. The $250,000 credit line draw had been categorized under donor relations. But the internal notes mentioned reputation transition support, which Rebecca said was one of the most expensive ways she had ever seen someone describe replacing a wife in public. And the amended operating agreement contained a signature that did not match mine. The forensic document examiner was very polite about it. His report used phrases like inconsistent stroke pressure, probable digital reproduction, and irregular terminal formation. I used fewer words. They forged it. Ethan did not deny it when questioned. That hurt more than I expected. I had imagined him defending himself, lying badly, blaming Vivian completely, maybe even crying. Instead, according to Rebecca, he sat in a conference room with his own attorney and said, "I thought it was a copy of something Mara had already approved." That was Ethan's final gift to me. Not honesty, not courage, just proof that even when cornered, he still could not say the sentence that mattered. I knew it was wrong. 2 days after that statement, I filed for divorce. Ethan came to the hotel the evening he was served. I was no longer staying under my maiden name. I had moved into a small furnished rental south of Broad, 3 blocks from the water, where the windows rattled when storms came in and nobody called me Mrs. Whitaker unless I chose to answer. He stood outside my door holding flowers, white roses. For a second, I almost laughed at the cruelty of coincidence. Or maybe it was not coincidence. Maybe Ethan really thought a smaller version of the ballroom could fix what happened inside it. I opened the door but did not invite him in. He looked thinner. His hair was uncombed. The easy charm was gone, and without it he looked younger than 37. Not innocent, just unfinished. "Mara," he said, "can we talk?" "We are talking." His eyes moved over my shoulder into the room he was not allowed to enter. I made mistakes. It was such a small sentence for such a large ruin. "Yes," I said, "you did." He swallowed. "I never wanted to hurt you." I leaned against the doorframe. "Then what did you want?" He looked confused. That was the problem with Ethan. He understood consequences only after they arrived. He had never been trained to examine the desire that came before them. "I wanted to save Harbor House," he said. "No," I said. "You wanted to save yourself from disappointing your mother." He flinched. "Mom pushed too hard." "Vivian pushed because she knew you would move." He looked down at the flowers. Water from the stems had begun dripping onto the hallway floor. "I froze," he said. "At the photo. I know I froze." "You didn't freeze, Ethan." His eyes lifted. "You chose the room that was easiest to stay in." He had no answer for that. For 6 years I had mistaken his softness for kindness. I had thought because he did not raise his voice, he was gentle. But silence can be violence when someone uses it as a shield and lets another person take the blow. He stepped closer. "I still love you." I believed him. That was the worst part. I believed Ethan loved me in the only way he knew how. Quietly, weakly, in private, when no one powerful was asking him to prove otherwise. But I had learned something standing on that veranda with my wet coat over my arm. A private love that publicly abandons you is not protection. It is a hiding place. "I loved you too," I said. His face broke a little. "Then don't end this." "I'm not ending it," I said. "I'm admitting when it ended." He started to cry then, not loudly. Ethan never did anything loudly if he could help it. Tears filled his eyes, and for a second my hand wanted to reach for him out of habit. I kept it at my side. He looked at my bare left hand. "Can I come in?" No, one word. Clean. Final. He left the roses in the hallway. I threw them away before they could wilt. By the end of the 2nd month, Harbor House had changed shape. Vivian's office was cleared out first. I was not there when it happened, but one of the managers told me she arrived with 2 movers, 3 garment bags, and Paige crying behind her in oversized sunglasses. Vivian tried to take the portrait from the lobby. Rebecca stopped that too. "Preserved evidence," she said. So the photograph stayed. Not in the lobby, of course. I was not that cruel. Or maybe I was not that theatrical. It stayed in the legal file where it belonged. The board voted to restructure Harbor House management under the default provisions of the operating agreement Vivian had tried to override. Because Ethan had participated in an unauthorized amendment attempt and undisclosed related party transfers, Bennett Compliance Holdings had the right to trigger a mandatory control shift. Rebecca explained it to me in her office with 3 folders, 2 highlighted sections, and 1 very calm sentence. They handed you the keys when they tried to lock you out. I became majority managing member of Harbor House Management LLC on a Thursday morning. There was no champagne, no family crest, no portrait, just signatures, bank acknowledgments, and a new operating resolution filed with the registered agent. The first thing I did was not fire everyone. That disappointed some people. I kept the front desk manager who had been there 22 years and knew more about Harbor House than any Whitaker ever had. I kept the night maintenance supervisor who knew which pipes groaned before a leak. I kept the housekeepers, the cooks, the gardener, the event coordinator Vivian once made cry because the napkins were ivory instead of cream. I did fire Paige, not because she was Ethan's sister, because the audit showed she had approved foundation reimbursements for personal styling, private dinners, and donor cultivation gifts that somehow included 2 handbags and a weekend spa charge. Paige sent me one text. "You're destroying my family." I sent it to Rebecca. Then I blocked her. Vivian never apologized. That surprised no one. She did send one letter through Graham Ellis, her attorney. 4 pages of polished self-pity about legacy, misunderstanding, generational pressure, and the unbearable pain of being misrepresented by selective images. Rebecca read it first and called me. "Do you want the summary?" "Yes." "She's sorry she got caught by a camera." I told Rebecca to file it and not respond. Celeste returned the $185,000 through her attorney. The memo line simply said, "Settlement of disputed consulting payment." She left Charleston before Christmas. Ethan moved into a condo near Mount Pleasant. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that he was taking time to heal. I hoped he did. I also hoped he learned that healing was not the same as waiting for someone else to forgive what you had not repaired. 6 months after the portrait, Harbor House reopened under new management. The West Wing had new wiring. The ballroom ceiling had been repaired. The contractor invoices were current, the donor reports were clean, the credit line was restricted, transparent, and watched by 3 people who knew better than to trust a family name more than a balance sheet. On reopening day, I hired Owen Callahan again. He hesitated when I called. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Completely." He arrived with 2 assistants, 3 cameras, and the same quiet professionalism he had shown the day Vivian tried to erase me. When he walked into the lobby, he paused under the empty space where the Whitaker portrait used to stand. "What are we shooting today?" he asked. "The people who actually kept this place alive." For the next 2 hours, he photographed everyone. Lena at the front desk, who remembered guests by name and room preference. Marcus from maintenance, holding a wrench and looking embarrassed to be in a tie. Elena, the head housekeeper, standing with her team in the West Wing hallway. The kitchen staff laughing around a prep table dusted with flour. The event coordinator, Nina, beneath the ballroom chandeliers, no longer afraid Vivian would appear and criticize the shape of a folded napkin. Then Owen lowered his camera and looked at me. "Where do you want to stand?" I thought about that for a moment. For years, Vivian had moved me to the edge, behind Paige, beside a plant, out of reflection, out of frame. She had treated photographs like legal documents, as if standing in the center could make someone legitimate and standing outside could make someone disappear. But I did not want the center. I had never needed it. I walked to the front steps of Harbor House and stood between Lena and Marcus, with the staff gathered around us and the open doors behind us. The lobby glowed warm in the afternoon light. The brass handles shone. The floor had been polished, but not so perfectly that it lied. Owen raised the camera. "Ready?" I looked at the people beside me, people who had shown up, people who had worked, people who had never needed pearls or surnames to prove they belonged. "Yes," I said, "ready." The shutter clicked. No one was thrown out. No one was replaced. No one was cropped from the truth. That evening, Owen sent the final proofs. I opened the email in my office, the one that used to belong to Vivian. The walls were no longer ivory. I had painted them a deep blue because I wanted the room to stop pretending it was harmless. The first photograph loaded. There we were on the steps of Harbor House, not perfect, not polished into a lie, but real. I downloaded it, printed it, and framed it in plain black wood. Underneath, I placed a small brass plaque with 2 words, "Proof matters." Sometimes people show you exactly who they are because they think no one important is watching. Sometimes they throw you out of a photograph because they believe pictures decide who belongs. And sometimes the camera catches the one thing they never meant to give you: the truth. My mother-in-law threw me out before the family photo because she thought the picture would prove I was not part of the family. She was right about one thing. The picture did prove something. It proved exactly who needed to be removed from the frame.